Well, I love me a window box, and I'm very excited to be planting this one finally for this year. But something has changed, and I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to help you kind of figure out how to make a window box look right on your house. So this window box looks basically just like the other one, but something has changed. It's bigger, and let me tell you why. So sizing a window box correctly is so important because they tend to look just a little bit off and a little bit unnatural if you don't have the right size. So sizing a window box is really site specific. It depends a lot on the style of your house, how many windows you're putting window boxes on, what color your window box is versus what color your siding is, even what kind of siding you have. It all makes a difference. And at some point you do have to kind of just trust your eye, but there are good reasons to go bigger than you think. So I'm going to put a comparison up on the screen for you of what the old window box that just came down looked like and what this one looked like. So what you'll notice when we compare these pictures is that the old window box was exactly the width of the trim on the windows. This one is actually a foot wider than that, so it's 6 inches on either side. And what that does is it helps balance things, because when a window sits on top of a window box, it can look out of balance. So while there's some wiggle room on this as to what looks good to your eye, a window box should never be narrower than your window. It should probably never be narrower than your window trim, but you can fudge this a little bit if you're going to plant it with a lot of stuff sticking out the side. Now, the other really nice thing about a bigger window box is bigger window box equals more plants. And there's one other thing that is different about this window box. I have had this window box be made to be 3 inches deeper, as in from the house out, than the old one was. And I think that's going to make a big difference. With the old window box, I was often trying to cram sort of 3 rows of plants in there, and I really had to smush those root balls. With this, I should be able to easily put 3 rows of plants in there, just enough room to keep everything happy in there. So this is the Hampton window box from Hooks and Lattices. This is this exact same style of window box as the old one was. Now, I don't know when I put that old one up. When I look back at pictures from our renovation in 2010, it was already on the house then. I think it was there for about a year. So by that calculation, I had the other window box for 14 years. So earlier this spring, I did a collaboration with Hooks and Lattices where I planted a nice container, interesting, fun container on the deck. And one of the reasons why I wanted to collaborate with them is because I had had such good luck with that other window box. Like, it's definitely an investment, but it lasted me 14 years. And it was perfect in all regards, except that I didn't buy one that was big enough from the get-go. So when I was talking to them for that, I said, hey, you don't by any chance customize window boxes, do you? Because I wanted the one that was longer, but it was the same depth as the one that I just got rid of. And they said, sure, we can customize the size of a window box for you. What do you want? So that's how I got this Hampton that is deeper. Now, upon further review, I kind of wish I also would have gotten it a little bit taller. However, I was cognizant of the fact that window boxes can get really, really heavy. So you do have to be careful when you're hanging this off the side of your house. We live in a 90-year-old house with some very sketchy construction techniques, including that a couple of years ago, we tried to hang a bell by our front door, and we almost went through the living room wall in the process of doing that because we realized there's no sheathing there. So what we have is siding, insulation, living room wall with no sheathing in between. So these are the things you run into in a 90-year-old house. And I am a little worried at some point I don't want to rip the side of my house down. So Hooks and Lattice was actually really nice, and they sent me this window box. So what's nice is that they've now changed the design on this to be automatically include a French cleat, which is maybe the best way to hang a window box if you can. We created a French cleat, which is basically just where you've got, you know, like a scarf joint, and there's 2 boards, one on the house and one on the window box, and they just slide right in. So we can pick this up and move this whenever we want, although when it's full, there's no moving this thing, to be clear. So it's very nice that it came with that. And we had already had a ledger board put up on the house when we had the other window box hanging on it. So that's the attachment point. They send you lag bolts and stuff. We didn't actually need those because we already had the ledger board, whatever. Every attachment is going to be different depending on what kind of house you have. So you just have to be careful, know what you're doing. I personally, if I was unsure about how to do it, I would like consult with a construction person about it. And don't let them talk you out of putting up a window box, because you should, as long as you're going to use it. And that's the other thing. Window boxes that are left sitting empty are so sad. So I like to have this full almost all year. There is always a gap. I rarely plant it up for spring, but there is a gap between fall and between the winter containers, when those are so shabby they have to be ripped out, and spring. But that brings me to another point, which is where you should hang your window box. So you can see here that we have hung this box an entire siding width lower than the window. Now we've got casement windows, which makes a big difference when you have a window box, because opening your windows obviously becomes a little bit more challenging. By hanging this box lower, first of all, it's mounted quite tall. The window is high here because we've got such a high foundation. So it's already pretty tall, and a tall window box can be hard to display because you're looking at it from the ground. So the lower you can make your window box, I feel like it's kind of easier to plant, to be honest, not just physically, but also just from viewing it. But this also allows us to crack those windows a little bit. So if we had double hung windows, it would be less of a factor. But I still like the idea of lowering the window box a little bit, so that you're not blocking your windows with your plants. So I don't feel bad about putting 18-inch tall or taller plants in these, because we're still going to be able to see out the window. Now this is a little easier for us to get away with because our siding, our window box, our trim are all white. But if you're dealing with a situation where your siding is a different color than your trim, or your window box is a different color, it might start looking a little stripy when you don't have plants there. My answer for this is just keep plants in it. The other thing is to note that the height of where your window box is mounted and where it's going to be viewed from are really important, because if you're viewing this window box from where I'm standing, which is, 3 feet away from it, you're not going to be able to see the top of it unless those plants are tall enough. So I like the ability to put taller plants in here. So make sure your plant selection matches the height of your window box. If you're dealing with a window box that is, here, the world is your oyster. You do whatever you want there. It's a great option. So do whatever you want if your window box is, at or below eye level for most people from where it's going to be viewed the most. Unfortunately, we tend to view this window box from farther away, so that also helps, so we can actually see the plants that are in it more or less. And then lastly, watering. Watering window boxes can be a total pain if they're as tall as this one is, and especially if you're talking second-story window boxes, you better have a plan for watering them, or else don't put them there, because if they become a big chore, then you're not going to want to do that, and then the plants are going to die and they're going to look even worse. So think carefully when you're putting a window box off of how you're going to get water to it. Now, I bought the other window box with a self-watering system in it, which I still have, but about 3 years ago I actually took that out and I just ran drip irrigation up to it. So this bed along the house is the only non-vegetable garden place where I have drip irrigation in the yard, but it's such a skinny little bed and I always plant annuals in it, so it's just so much easier with drip here. So what I have done is, don't pay attention to this black part, but the white part, I took some white solid 1/4 inch tubing and I ran it up from the drip irrigation, and I just tuck that behind the window box, and then I will put 1/4 inch drip tubing inside of it. Now you see the white a little bit at the beginning of the year, but I plant dahlias all along in this area. So I much prefer the drip irrigation to the self-watering system, just because with the self-watering system, you still have to get up there once a week to fill up that reservoir. Now the last thing to note is you'll see these little brackets. A lot of window box manufacturers offer these. These are just made from foam. And that is actually how we leveled this window box. So that's the other thing. Make sure your window box is level. Window boxes that are sagging look terrible. I'm pretty uptight about level pots to begin with, but particularly on window boxes, you want to make sure that it's level. So when we attach these foam decorative brackets, what we did was we actually pushed them a little bit out to the back so that those are attached just with construction adhesive, so those actually hold the window box out, because of course your siding is beveled or whatever we're calling this, so it's not level. So we have actually pushed those out so that the window box actually sticks out straight, and so it's nice and level and it's not a sad saggy window. I have already filled this up with Organic Mechanics container mix, a little bit of premium blend, which works well in here, although it's a little heavier, which is why I didn't put a lot of it in. little bit of biochar blend in there, and then like a good amount of Osmocote in it. So I've already done that. Do use really good potting mix in your window boxes. These are hard working. There is so much happening with plants in a window box because they're generally pretty jammed in. So do use really good potting mix and plan on replacing it every year. When I pulled out the potting mix from last year, it almost came out in one rectangle because the roots just fully filled up every single corner. So plan on probably having to replace your potting mix every year. I don't do that in any other pot that I can think of. I usually just take the top and put new stuff on the top, but you're probably going to have to do that in your window box because roots are going to fill up all that soil. Okay, my last tip for window boxes is if you have to plant them on a ladder, it can be helpful to just lay it out on the ground and then go up and plant them, which is what we're going to do for this one. All right, I'm going to talk you through the plants as I lay them out on the ground. Then we'll do the ladder thing. Okay, first up is 2 Fiona Sunrise jasmines. This is what I used in the container with the banana. These are going to go on the very ends. I'm going to put some stakes in there for them to climb up, but also I hope these will also drape over on the ends. Now I mentioned that I don't particularly love trailers in this planter, and that's because the dahlias do grow so high underneath it, and when there's trailers you almost can't even tell it's a window box. It just ends up looking like a giant heap of plants. So a little bit of delineation there I feel is good, but this will definitely stand out. So these go on the corners. For the back we're going to use Dinella Silver Streak, not a hardy plant here. I just really wanted to lean into foliage, and so this is definitely leaning into foliage in the back. I wanted thicker texture here, like a more bold texture with this, because I feel like when I looked through my old window boxes, that's what was missing, was a bold texture accent. So that's what we're gonna do with this. I'm gonna switch to the front, and I think we're gonna use this bromeliad in the front. This is Secretia. I think it used to be Tredscantia, but it's Secretia, or maybe it didn't, I always had it wrong, called Purple Heart. They are not balanced at all, but I think we're gonna put those as sort of a front of the box. I have never used a Volvus before, but I love that blue color. So we're putting blue in this mix as well. Okay, this is more or less the plan. I had to kind of pause and just lay it out because I just needed to. More or less the front and the middle rows are kind of all blending together here, but other plants in here are gonna be this lemon lime helichrysum. This is a plant that I'm using almost everywhere this year. I just really am leaning in heavily to the chartreuse this year. So we're kind of trying to keep that through line happening here as well. I do have back here, this is sort of a last minute addition. This is Verbena Empress Sun-Kissed Blue. When I look at the picture for it, it looks more purple than blue. Either one will work, so I'm not too worried about it. Scaevola, this is Starlight, Whirlwind Starlight Scaevola, so we'll have 3 of those across the front as sort of a semi-trailing element. Then I have Ogon grass. I love this Acarus grass. It's just a nice chartreusey accent. Hopefully it sticks up enough when it's at the front that we actually see it. And then a collection of things in the coral and peach family, Coralina Superbells, Superbena Peachy Keen. I think Superbena Peachy Keen has been in almost every window box I've ever made. I just love the plant. And I think that's the rundown of all the plants. Now, this might change once we get up there, but this is good enough for me to get moving on this. One little tip here, I always have a tub of water to give plants a dunk and let them, because especially in a window box, planting things with a dry root ball is a really bad idea. It does not work well. It takes forever for them to rehydrate, and they're so much happier when they're wet. And this is just a quick way to get everything really well hydrated before I put it in. Okay, here's what it looks like from ground level, a few feet away. So right now I'm feeling like it's very fine textured on the front, other than that bromeliad, but I think as it flowers, the flower texture will add to that. My hope is that the helichrysum, which you actually can't see at all right now, will grow sort of up and through. That's the way that helichrysum looks the best, if you ask me, is when it's growing through plants, not when it's just a bulky thing on its own. But I think I'll work to pull that forward a little bit. And I haven't put the trellises up yet, so I'm going to water this in and stick the trellises up so you can see what that looks like, and then we'll do a final look at this. All right, here it is from up here. I am loving the colors, and I hope as these things flower prolifically, we have a good amount of color in here, in addition to the chartreuse, which is again kind of the through line for a lot of the plantings in this area. Okay, so here's an up close view. The drip tubing is just kind of laid in there because I don't have any staples, so I need to get some staples to kind of hold it in the right place, because I do sort of route it specifically around specific plants. Like for instance, I'm obviously not going to put it at the base of the bromeliad. I did make a last minute change. I did pull two of the helichrysums forward a little bit, and then because I thought we were missing an element between the Dianella and the Fiona Sunrise, I found a velocity blue salvia that I had left over, and then I needed another one, so I just pulled it out of the ground where I had it planted and sacrificed one there, which we probably won't miss it. So now that's nice. Those get, I think, 12 to 16 inches tall. So we'll get nice blue shot there, which would be really good with that Fiona Sunrise chartreuse. And that will fill in that area. And now I was able to bring this helichrysum forward a little bit. There's the final planting, but of course it needs to grow in. You'll notice that the Dianella is just peeking up a little bit, so we can just see it from inside, but as these plants grow, it'll probably reach like the bottom mullion or so of the window, so about a third of the window will ultimately be covered. And then I've used these same bamboo canes. I just tie them at the top and stick them in a little tripod form on these corners as my little curtains to grow that vine up, which I think is really good because we have a very tall house, so that sort of helps make the height of this a little bit more proportional. The other benefit of adding in the salvia and this helichrysum are that those are two plants that are planted quite heavily below this area. So again, we're going to have some reference, and these two areas will make a little bit more sense when viewed as a whole as they grow in. There's the finished window box from standing away. Certainly there's a lot happening in it, which is exactly how I want a window box to be. So I hope you enjoyed watching that, and I hope you got some tips for sizing a window box and choosing a window box. You know, unlike other containers that are sort of temporary, we can move them around when we don't like where they are, a window box has a certain permanence to it because we are affixing it to the side of a house. So you do want to make sure you kind of nail it right the first time, and that you're going to use it and make the most of it, because if you're going to do that, like, you want it there showing its best self off as often and as much as possible. Make sure you like and subscribe so that you can see how this grows in. I think it's going to be good, but you never really know at this stage, do you? That either makes gardening very interesting or a little scary. Let's go with the first one. All right, have a great day in your garden, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.